we are ready for our next interview. And for this interview, I'd like to bring on Jesse from Base. We're going to talk about a lot of things that they've been up to, and we're going to go into what they are excited about. So without further ado, please welcome Jesse on stage.
Hello, everybody. Can we give up another round of applause to Georgios, please? I feel like Georgios and the team have pushed forward crypto infrastructure, Ethereum infrastructure, more than basically anyone else for the last few years. So super grateful to be working with Georgios and the Paradigm team.
We owe a lot to the developer infrastructure here. Just the amount of acceleration we've gotten in the last 2 years alone through the open source initiatives has been amazing. Speaking of moving things forward, you, as Base, just crossed 1 billion transactions a couple of days ago. That's an amazing milestone. Congrats.
Thank you.
And the thing I'm kind of curious about is, how do you kind of think about what led to this amazing milestone this fast? How do you kind of attribute to what sort of inspired this growth? And if you were to kind of reverse engineer this outcome, how do you think about this?
Yeah, I think 3 things probably have come together over the last year, because it's really been just a year since Base went live. The first is, I think, timing. Like the technology has really matured to the point where it works in the last year, and I think we've been, a driving force in helping kind of put those pieces together. But there is just this moment that's happening right now where on-chain adoption is growing very fast, and we've been able to kind of like push through and make that work. The second thing is, I think we've invested really heavily in developer tools and making it incredibly easy for developers to build apps on Base. And then that's led to downstream effects of people actually building apps that people use. And that flywheel is spinning faster and faster. The third thing is, I do think we've had some help from Coinbase. We started with a head start around brand Base from Coinbase. We also, I think, have benefited from being able to tap into Coinbase distribution to bring users on chain, help them find really meaningful things to do on chain that actually provide value to them in their day-to-day life, and that's been a big driver of adoption. And then the fourth thing, which I think is probably the biggest driver, is I and we have just been relentlessly in the trenches. I mean, I'm just flying around the world right now, meeting builders, and I think through that work, there's been a culture of builders lifting up builders that it's merged on Base that is super self-reinforcing. And I think we talk a lot about kind of virality of consumer experiences on the internet, but I think we're seeing right now with Base virality of builder experiences, where builders are coming to Base, they're building, they're having an experience where they feel connected, they feel supported, they feel like they're actually able to get things done and make an impact, and then they're going to their friends and saying, hey, come build with me. And that's been this kind of ripple effect through the industry where more and more people are choosing Base every single day.
That's amazing. And I think kind of the thing that I found super interesting about just kind of seeing this was that you usually see virality when you see a consumer app, mostly like social apps, or just a meme kind of get big, and that's kind of where it comes from. But this is a really interesting example of virality from a developer app standpoint, totally. And that's a very unique thing. Like, yeah. It's just not a common thing.
Yeah, and I think it's, there is precedent for it. Like if you look at the rise of Stripe, or you look at the rise of other like really, really impactful developer tools, MongoDB, you had a similar dynamic where you basically had developers leading adoption, developers referring it to other developers, and then that actually driving adoption inside of larger corporate structures. Because who's going to be there at the end of the day making a decision? It's a developer who has to be the one to write the tech doc, the one to actually decide to build something. And so I think that's what we're seeing happen with Base right now, and I expect it to happen faster and faster.
Amazing. Speaking of, only been a year. If you were to reflect on kind of where you are now and what you started off with, how have the goals changed in terms of what you wanted to do, or have you kind of done any refinements on what the goals are now and the ambitions of Base?
Yeah, when we started Base, I think we really started conceiving of Base as a developer platform. Like the first mission statement that I ever wrote for Base was, we're going to build a world-class developer platform that enables people to build on-chain apps. And I think that's spot on. And this goes back to what we were just talking about in terms of developer virality. I feel like we're seeing a ton of traction there. But over the last 6 to 12 months, I'd say that our conception of Base has really started to expand. And we've really started to think about the developer platform as one of the core components of a much broader economy that we're really starting to build. And this has re-anchored us on a new mission statement, which is this idea of building a global on-chain economy that increases innovation, creativity, and freedom. And then within that mission of building a global on-chain economy, I think you can then break it down kind of by strategic pillar, and developers is one of them. Like, one of the important things we need to do is we need to build a developer platform that makes it easy for people to build on-chain apps. But we also need to kind of nurture a really vibrant ecosystem of apps that make it, give a reason for regular people and everyday businesses to come on chain. And we also need to nurture a vibrant 24/7 capital market that kind of interconnects the global economy. And then we also need to build a decentralized, scalable platform that kind of connects all these things together. And so I'd say we've really kind of expanded the aperture of how we think about Base, which has then, I think, let us talk to a lot more different kinds of people and bring them into the Base economy, because there's something that resonates more with them than just the pure developer go-to-market.
And you're not even talking about like a prerequisite. These are like all things that have to kind of work with each other, and it's very symbiotic. So this makes total sense. But you're saying the focus is now to also pay enough attention to all the other groups 100%. So that they can get.
Yeah, and it's aligned with this kind of like meme that we've been pushing, which is this idea that everyone's a builder. And as we're building this new global economy, we're going to need people with tons of diverse skill sets to make it happen. And so I think whereas before we were speaking really, really directly to developers, I think now we're speaking to creators who have an opportunity to kind of like build their followings, build their creativity on chain. We're speaking to communities who have an opportunity to build their communities on chain. And I think that that's really, on this world tour in particular, it's a theme that we've heard again and again, is people say, something about Base makes me feel included in a way that crypto hasn't in the past. And I think that's because historically crypto has been this thing that has felt technical, that has felt kind of a little esoteric, speculative, trading centric. And with Base and the idea that Base is for anyone, everyone can be a builder, I think people kind of see an entry point where they can use their skill set to contribute to this economy. And then once they find one way to show up, then they can kind of land and expand, because you start creating on Base and then you're like, oh, this economy actually works way better for me in all these other ways. Let me expand my skill set. Let me expand how I'm using the tools here and make an even broader impact on the world.
That's awesome. I actually do want to go into a bit more depth on that one, but maybe kind of while we're on topic of actually expanding the aperture here, you are a superchain member or part of the superchain. How kind of do you think about the role that's played in your success, and just altogether, like, what does it mean to be part of the superchain for Base?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we decided, when we were kind of thinking about how we wanted to build Base, that we wanted to build open source. We wanted to contribute back to the infrastructure, and we wanted to be a part of something bigger than just ourselves. And that's why we built on Ethereum as a layer 2, and it's also why we decided to build with Optimism as part of the superchain. And so Base is now a core developer of the OP stack. And really what we're seeing emerge is we're seeing a collective of people come together and say, hey, we're going to build an open source technology foundation that allows all of us to accelerate faster. And I think this is kind of what Georgios was getting at in the talk right before this. Like, we actually need to accelerate the technology foundation that we are building on, because we are now within striking distance of building world-class products, but we're not quite there. And one of the biggest ways we can accelerate is by all focusing our energies in one place rather than fragmenting them across many places. And so I think our thesis with the OP stack has really been about getting that force multiplier of many teams coming together to make something happen that is way bigger than any one of us. And I think it's been really successful. Like, if you look at the data today, a majority of transactions on layer 2s are going through the OP stack. There's an incredible developer community building around it. We're making progress on technology. We just launched fault proofs. We're about to get to stage 1, and I expect that kind of acceleration to continue because we have more and more teams coming in to join and build with us.
And I mean, and obviously you kind of see so many network effects as part of this too, because you're seeing specialization, you're seeing just people come in from one avenue and stick and go to the next one, and everybody benefits, which is awesome. The thing I actually want to know your opinion on is we're seeing, and we have seen a lot of chatter on Twitter especially, just around kind of how people either misunderstand or kind of think that the L2s are contentious to L1 Ethereum. And this fragmentation is actually bad. It doesn't kind of make Ethereum better, or just it creates a world that we don't really want. Kind of how do you think about this? Do you kind of really think the L2s are a good thing? If so, well, I know the answer. But what should we tell people who think the other way?
Totally.
Let's go with that.
Yeah, well, first off, I definitely think L2s are a good thing. And I'd say like the thing that I observe is that I think, especially in the echo chamber of Twitter, we can get into a mode as an industry where we are thinking very short term. And we're looking at signals like, oh, the fees that people are paying for blobs, and we're taking a short term data point, and then we're extrapolating it in a way that really doesn't make sense towards a longer term outcome. And I think when you take a step back and you think about, okay, we've been executing against the technical strategy for the last 3 years to scale Ethereum, and it's working very, very well. Like, we've literally scaled Ethereum more than 100x in the last year, and there's a pathway to scaling it 100x, 1000x next year. That's the lens that I think we should be applying first and foremost. And then, as we're on that scaling path, are there, temporary imbalances in the economics? Sure, that's what happens when you're going into growth mode. That's why Uber subsidized their rides, because it lets Uber expand very aggressively. We're letting L2s expand very aggressively. And even just in the last couple of weeks, we've started to see that rebalance as we've hit the blob target, and we've actually started to have L2s paying for the blob space. And so I think the kind of mindset that I always tell my team is like, it's never as good as it seems, and it's never as bad as it seems. And I feel like that's we need to be keeping in mind with L2s. It's like we haven't solved all of the problems, because we still have a lot of work to do. We have to solve interoperability. We have to make this experience more seamless to users. But also, L2s are not extractive, like antithesis of Ethereum. L2s in the last year have onboarded tens of millions of users and tens of thousands of developers to Ethereum that otherwise would not have been here. And they're running massive marketing campaigns around the globe to educate people about Ethereum and to provide real value to everyday folks in terms of apps, financial services, and more. And so I really think that this is a synergistic relationship, and it's the strategy we've been executing on now for 3 years. And the best thing that we can do is continue to learn, continue to iterate, but be patient and focused and relentless, and keep our eyes towards the horizon, which is building this global economy that's going to be so big, like it's going to have more than enough room for all of us.
I think that's a really good way to kind of reset that expectation, and also it's one of those things where we get to see the outcomes immediately because the economics are tied to the growth altogether. Going just a little bit into the infrastructure side of things, what is missing in actually making that 100x improvement here, and especially with you pioneering a lot of the aggressive number of transactions going through, you've been talking a lot about Giga-gas. Tell us what that is and why that's important.
Yeah, so when we're thinking about what are the key kind of remaining infrastructure unlocks to enable 1 billion people to come on chain, there are really 3 big pieces that we're looking at. The first is that we need to continue driving down the costs of transaction even as overall demand increases. And so on Base this year, we've done something like 15x in throughput, and at the same time, we've done something like 100x reduction in cost. So
and that's through blobs as well.
Yes, okay. That's through blobs. So we've reduced the cost 100x, and the average median transaction cost is now something like a quarter of a cent, at the same time as 17xing the number of transactions that we're processing. If we want to be successful, we need to do that again. Like, we need to 1000x the throughput, and we still need to keep driving down the costs. And so that's where a Giga-gas comes in. This is a kind of North Star that we have for the total capacity of Base. You can kind of think about it like the internet going from dial-up to broadband. We started the year at 2.5 megagas, which is 0.0025 gigagas. And right now we're at 17 megagas, which is about 8x. And by the end of next year, we want to be at something like 200 megagas and then get towards a giga-gas. And so that's really the first kind of prong of the strategy in terms of enabling these next use cases. It's low cost, very scalable, highly available chain block space.
How is that gas getting bigger?
Yeah.
Why don't you just change the number?
Yeah, well, you can't just change the number and that works until it doesn't. Because the number is really meant to be kind of a heuristic for whether the chain is going to be able to reliably scale at that rate for a very long duration of time. And so when we're working towards increasing that number, we're really working across three things. One is we're working across execution, which is like literally can we run the node fast enough so that it can actually keep up with the blocks and publish them on some sort of hardware that is not the same kind of low-level hardware requirements that Ethereum has, but we still want people to be able to run nodes without super sophisticated kind of like home setups. So that's the first thing. The second thing that we have to run into is when you scale the chain that aggressively and you're increasing the target, you end up having a lot more state in the chain. And so we need to be thinking about how do we give node runners a scalable way of managing that state, either through things like state expiry, which is more research oriented, or things like changing the overall database or mempool structure. So you can actually push more of that state kind of out of the hot path and into horizontally scalable storage. And then the third big part of the scaling kind of need is we actually need bandwidth to put that state in, or to put those transactions into, and that's Ethereum data availability, where the base team has been working on 4844 and then more recently on PeerDAS. And in order to keep increasing our target, we need to be making consistent progress across the three of those things. Now, one thing that the base team just in the last 6 months has done, which I think is it's kind of like a shift in perspective for us, is we've made a commitment to increase our gas target by 1 megagas per week in perpetuity. And what that has kind of enabled for us is it now enables us to just draw the line and project out and be like, well, by the middle of next year, here's where we'll be. Here's what our state will look like. Here's what we need to process from a throughput perspective. Here's how much data availability is. And that's not only useful for us, it's also incredibly useful for the rest of the ecosystem. Because now people can start to plan around, okay, here's the actual bandwidth that base needs. And we found that to be a very useful forcing function for our team, where it's like, it's not that we're gonna like make some changes and then see whether it works. It's like, no, we're gonna scale. And we just have to do the work to do that. And so we're really excited about the progress we've made there. So that's the first big bucket. The two other pieces of infrastructure that I think we need in order to bring 1 billion people on chain, I still think we need to make wallets easier. And Georgios was just talking about this. Things like 7702, 4337, passkeys. We need to combine that with smart wallets to really make it so we have a wallet substrate that's both programmable and secure. And I think that has the opportunity to move us from a world where right now, kind of like you onboard a friend to crypto, it's expensive, it's annoying, it's complex, and you have to sit them down and give them the talk, where it's like, don't fuck it up or you're gonna lose all your money. And then we can actually get to a world where it's like, oh no, like you can have the same level of confidence in your wallet as your bank account. And that's really only possible with smart wallets because we can actually program in security in a way that isn't possible with EOAs. And then we can enable a ton more easy user experiences that I think will let more and more people come on chain faster and faster. So that's the second big bucket that I think we need to keep pushing on. We've made a lot of progress in the last year with the smart wallet, but we have a lot more work to do in the year ahead. And then I'd say the third thing that we really need to keep pushing on is bringing identity and kind of social graphs on chain. The more metadata we can bring to users that we can then allow them to manage in a way that still kind of maintains their privacy, but kind of share that information with apps, the easier time developers are going to have building apps that are really useful. And I think we've started to see this emerge with things like on-chain social graphs from Farcaster, where once you have that social graph, you can then start to actually build way more engaging apps because you can go into the app and you don't have to do a cold start. It just works.
You have that context, you have history, and you have reputation that matters.
Everything. And so I think if we can make progress, like I really feel like we finally have a good enough offering across those three axes, and in the next 6 months we'll get to like an excellent offering across those axes, and that's what's going to enable these kind of next breakout consumer products to emerge.
Amazing. So maybe kind of to end as my last question, you've kind of set the stage on what infrastructure is going to look like in just a few months and obviously a few years down the road. We're going to make some really good guarantees and assumptions around scale and the ability to handle that. What do you kind of think are the opportunities for builders here and just founders to think about getting in their products in the hand of billions of users? Like, are there obvious things that you think that this global commerce economy unlocks that are crypto native, or what's good advice for what to build?
Yeah, I mean, we're really excited about everything in the on-chain economy, games, NFTs, real-world assets, all of that. But I will say that as we're heading into 2025, it feels like there's two segments that are particularly primed to explode. The first is payments. And this is where we've seen, I'd say the most product market fit on chain over the last few years. And I think with stablecoins and L2 fees coming down, with the proliferation of local stablecoins, which is actually something we're driving, where by the middle of next year, our goal is to have the top 50 local currencies all on chain, all on base. I think that payments has an opportunity to really become like the default standard for payments globally, which is gonna be a huge driver of adoption. Now, the challenge with payments is that even if we build a really, really good product there, if you look at the growth trajectories of payments businesses historically, it's actually relatively slow. Like you look at Cash App or you look at Venmo in the United States, those businesses grow something like 30%, 40% year over year, which is pretty good, but it's a linear growth rate. And that means that for them to kind of get to the scale they're at now, it's taken 10 plus years. And I think the bar right now is even higher. And so if we're just thinking about payments growth, I don't think we're gonna go from the low millions that we have on chain today to billions of people on chain in the next few years. It's too slow. There actually has to be something else that drives that really, really rapid expansion of on-chain utility. And that's where I think the second category comes in, which is social. Like if you look at the internet and you look at what has driven growth over the last 20 years in a consumer viral way, it is social exclusively.
How do you tie social with payments here?
They're deeply, deeply interconnected. And I think that intersection of people building social, viral consumer products that have money built into them and enable new economics for creators where they earn 10x more, that enable new experiences for consumers where they actually get to earn by participating rather than just being kind of these people who are tapping and, like kind of getting
just
ignored. I think that intersection is going to both be viral and it's going to be something that builds a better economy for the people who are participating in it. And that's going to mean it's going to be sustainable and long-lived. And I think payments is going to be something that kind of comes along for the ride in the messaging experiences and the feed experiences and the other social community experiences that get built over the next year. And I think when we are successful in building these on-chain social products, we will be very surprised at how fast it happens. Because I don't think it's going to be another 10 years for us to get to 1 billion people. I think that in the next year, we will have consumer social products that start growing and will be at billions of users over the next 2 to 3 years.
That's an amazing prediction. Let's hope it comes true for this entire industry to actually flourish. Yeah. So thank you so much for this amazing conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Please give him a big round of applause.
Thanks, everybody.